Mark Dونفريد, you're director and founder of Institute for Cultural Diplomacy in Berlin. Could you please tell us when it was created, what is the purpose of this institute, and why cultural diplomacy?
Sure. We started the Institute in 1999, and there we had the interest to try to develop more research, more teaching, and more programs in the field of cultural diplomacy. We saw there was a big need. Cultural diplomacy of the past tended to be governmental. So you would have, Alliance Française, British Council promoting, those nations' countries abroad or their cultures. During the Cold War period, it was very much also about persuasion. How do we win the hearts and minds of foreign audiences? How do we attract? Today we saw a different need. If you look at the relationship between countries and also cultures around the world, persuasion isn't necessarily going to help to strengthen the relationship. Rather, understanding and trust. So that's really what we feel should be the objective of the new school, quote-unquote, cultural diplomacy. How do we build trust? How do we build understanding? So it's much more about also humility as opposed to arrogance, much more about a two-way exchange as opposed to a one-way projection, saying this is Germany, this is the US. So that's the field we're interested in. When we started ICD, we noticed there was nothing there that was non-governmental and also non-partisan and non-for-profit dealing with cultural diplomacy. So that's really the niche we're trying to fill. There's very little research in the world, very little teaching. The only academic programs that are offered are actually by ICD in partnership with universities. So that's essentially the niche we're trying to fill. Our mission, so to speak, is really that cultural diplomacy should be about how do we educate, enhance, and sustain relationships with the goal of fostering dialogue, understanding, and trust. So,
as far as I heard from the speakers in the conference these past 2 days, is that they have emphasized greatly on the role of civil society in promoting the culture of tolerance, the culture of peace, and the culture of mutual understanding between people of different cultures. How your institute has worked to promote a constructive dialogue between civil society organizations and public powers with the aim of promoting the culture of peace and tolerance in the world.
Okay, well, one of our passions at the Institute, also one of my personal passions, is to bring people together who normally wouldn't come together. Our three main target audiences at the Institute would be the high level, in terms of heads of state, ministers, etc., young leaders, which is usually early 20s to late 30s, individuals with 3 to 5 years professional experience, and then civil society, which is actually everyone, so firefighters, nurses, high school teachers. So it's a broad target audience. Some of our events are very targeted, where we may just have young leaders, or we may just have citizens. We did, for example, in Berlin, many events. One example, we rented the America House Berlin, which is the former building the Americans had used in the Cold War for cultural diplomacy. Big building, you can get 300, 400 people there. And we would do public events, free of charge. We worked with high schools. We did one event called Black History Month, looking at the African diaspora, where we gave Black History Month awards to people in the community who had actually given, significant contributions to the community. So that would be one approach, really, directly engaging with the civil society organizations, bringing them in, having them not only as guests, but also participants. The second way we try to engage civil society is indirectly, through the young leaders. It's very difficult for us to, let's say, strengthen the Moroccan-German relationship. We can't bring every Moroccan to Germany and every German to Morocco. So we have the multiplier idea. Let's bring some young leaders from Morocco and some young leaders from Germany together. We can work with a smaller group, hopefully inspire them, empower them, help give them access to other young leaders, access to partners, access to other resources that will then enable them to go back and make contributions to civil society. It's much better for a Moroccan to come up with his own ideas for how can we help Moroccan civil society than an American or a German. So that's the way indirectly we try to really empower individuals to actually go and be the agents of change that maybe are needed in different communities.
Your institute will be organizing Germany Meets Morocco in the next few weeks. What will be the theme of the conference and why you have chosen Morocco?
Sure. I mean, a conference such as Germany Meets Morocco, we're basically looking how do we educate, enhance, and sustain the Moroccan-German relationship? What are the key challenges facing the relationship? What are the key opportunities? How can we make more of the opportunities? How can we minimize the challenges, so to speak? And I think there it's interesting through the lens of the young leaders to do so. And really they're helping us identify identified the key challenges and opportunities together with high-level guests who will also come and speak. Morocco is a fascinating country because there, as we see a region, let's say Northern Africa, where one has a lot of transition at the moment with the Arab Spring, etc., one sees with Morocco a certain stability. You don't have the same protests in the streets. There are some, but much smaller. You don't have the same revolutions. You don't have the same gap and distance between, let's say, the king and the people. So there seems to be something happening in Morocco that's working, in the sense when one has the impression there's a call and a response. If the citizens are demanding, this and this, there does seem to be a response from up above. And so in that sense, I think maybe even as a role model, Morocco is fascinating in terms of why is it that Morocco is relatively, functioning well compared to some of the neighbors. So I think Morocco in and of itself is quite interesting given that political reality. Secondly, culturally, you could argue that Morocco has actually been an expert and really a leader in the field of cultural diplomacy. Examples such as the Fez Sacred Music Festival, where you're bringing different faiths, different religions together for a long time already. It's not something that started this year. Or other aspects of Moroccan culture that really have helped to bridge, let's say, also the multiculturalism in Morocco. Whether it's the Jewish communities, Muslim communities, Christian communities, there does seem to be many examples in Morocco where actually cultural diplomacy is working.
Would your institute consider Morocco as a potential partner in organizing an ICT conference or even having an ICT branch in Morocco? Because as far as I can see, you don't have any branch in any Arab country.
Definitely. I mean, the only exception would be maybe Turkey, where we've done a lot of work for a long time, Istanbul and Ankara. But I definitely would like to expand around the world. And I think Morocco could be a great location. I think especially there you're really much closer to many different groups in Northern Africa and beyond, where right now it's probably difficult for them, for someone necessarily to come from the African continent to come to Berlin or to Geneva. There's the financial challenges, there's the visa challenges. So I think to do something in Morocco would be great. As we've discussed, we're actually intending to do something as early as October of this year in Morocco. One opportunity is, I believe it's October 6th, which is the day of the Moroccan woman, the national day, where we're already discussing with a few partners that we could actually do something in Morocco. The key thing that we need, of course, is a local partner. And I think there in terms of logistics, venue, etc., and also expertise. I don't want to do something that seems like a great idea in Berlin and just put it in Morocco, unless really there is an interest there, that it really fits also the interests of the communities at hand. So longer answer to your question, yes, we definitely would like to do something in Morocco, and there we really believe in the power of partnership. So we want to partner with local organizations. Ultimately speaking, your point of having a branch office would be great. And I think there, of course, to set up an office from scratch can be challenging. But as a future goal, that would be great.
Among the most interesting points that have been discussed during this forum in Geneva is the link between culture diplomacy and sustainable development. Could you elaborate on that?
Sure. For a long time, cultural diplomacy was looked upon as its own field. It was the business of governments. So how do we promote our political agenda abroad using culture? We believe at the Institute there's a much broader goal and actually a need for cultural diplomacy to engage citizens, to build that understanding and trust. It's not just the job of governments. Meaning that we actually need to see how does cultural diplomacy interrelate with other fields. This week we're focusing on sustainable development and culture diplomacy. Again, traditionally two very different fields, but we feel if one takes, let's say, this engagement of culture diplomacy and applies it in the context of sustainable development, we think the sustainable development will be more successful. At the same token, if we look at culture diplomacy and take into account some of the strategies, some of the policies, and some of the initiatives of sustainable development, that culture diplomacy first will be more interesting, and secondly will have more impact. It won't just be doing a concert for the sake of doing a concert, but really bringing people together to enable further collaboration, such as in the context of sustainable development. So in that sense, it's very important this week really to see how these two fields interrelate and to try to find opportunities for how one can correlate the efforts to a greater degree.
Also, during the conference, we heard a lot of terminology related basically to parallel diplomacy. We heard humanitarian diplomacy, protective diplomacy, parliamentarian diplomacy. There are a lot of definitions according to different organizations and different objectives. Do you think that parallel diplomacy could be an approach that governments would take into account in elaborating their public policies. It's like a gender-based approach, participative democracy, etc.
No, I think there the different diplomacies can certainly complement each other, and it can be done in a parallel way. It can be done also in a coordinated way. There, in essence, the word diplomacy really means, let's say the alternative to a conflict. We can go to war, or we can have a diplomatic solution. So I think whether it's cultural diplomacy or parliamentarian diplomacy or humanitarian diplomacy, all of these fields are actually working towards the same end, in the sense to try to find a way to make collaboration easier, cooperation easier. If we can cooperate with each other, we're less likely to fight each other. So in that sense, definitely I think these diplomacies are moving in the same direction. And I would encourage, first of all, the power of partnerships. I think there, if we can get the sectors working together whenever possible, even better. If not, then at least to make sure, as you were saying, that it moves parallel, that it moves complementary, that the right hand knows what the left hand is doing, and that people aren't shooting themselves in the leg, so to speak. Very often, just due to the issue of fragmentation, duplication, etc., you have organizations working for the same goals in the same regions, and they maybe don't know each other, or they don't coordinate with each other. And the overall efficiency can certainly be increased if they do know about each other and if they can collaborate. So that's a special opportunity where one can bring the diplomacies together.
As far as scientific research is concerned, we know that there are very few and limited research on cultural diplomacy, and your institute has done a lot of efforts in promoting scientific research.
The research that is there is primarily transatlantic based in terms of the transatlantic relations and the Cold War period. Beyond that, there's very little in terms of Africa, the Middle East, Asia. So in general, there's a need for that. Specifically, what's interesting now with the quote-unquote Arab world is especially with the Arab Spring. We're seeing many new developments, where we're seeing in particular the empowerment of youth, also civil society, also the use of modern technology, Facebook, social media, etc. So many things are changing, meaning, first of all, it's an interesting region. Secondly, there's, I think, a special potential, actually, that the Arab world has now that maybe it didn't have before. And we're seeing also, I think, an opportunity for cultural diplomacy that's also new, that actually young people, citizens really can do much more and can engage much more. Their voices can be heard now around the globe. So it's a very interesting time. So I think there, on the one hand, maybe it's too new to really do research. It's still evolving as we speak. On the other hand, I think certainly looking at the contemporary period, the last 5 years, the last 10 years, there's a lot that can be learned. I think for many people, the Arab Spring wasn't really a surprise. If you had been listening to the music, if you had been seeing the movies, if you had been reading the Facebook groups as opposed to the U.S. State Department just writing on Facebook, we could have actually seen, I think, much earlier the indications that led to the quote-unquote Arab Spring. So for many reasons, yes, there's definitely a need for more research, and also I think there's a very high interest, and we could learn a lot. I think there are many countries in the world that are also looking at the role model of Tunisia and saying, all right, how can we maybe adapt that to our own situation? So for many reasons, I definitely think it would be great.
In my last question, if I asked you to give me the 3 most important results that you have achieved since 1999 in cultural diplomacy.
Yeah, I suppose it would fall under the 3 pillars of the ICD. And so in terms of research, we have this one book, Searching for Cultural Diplomacy, outlining international examples, as I said. So it's one of the first of its kind. Japan, Middle East, Italy, really around the world. Secondly, Cultural Diplomacy Outlook, which is an annual publication where we try to really give an overview of what's happening in the entire world, public sector, private sector, civil society, in the field of cultural diplomacy. So in terms of research, I think there's been some important contributions. In terms of teaching, the first and the only programs academically in cultural diplomacy are now initiated by ICD. We offer MA, MBA, and PhD programs. So in that sense, I think we've put cultural diplomacy on the map, also academically. I very much hope that it will grow, and other universities will also take that into account and into their curriculum. The third, and maybe the most important result, or let's say contribution that I think ICD has made, is actually touching human beings. In the sense, we brought many people together through our staff and our interns, where I say cultural diplomacy begins, in the office, through the participants of our programs. We have over 8,000 alumni from the leaders programs. I don't know how many tens of thousands of participants from all of the conferences done around the world. And as I was mentioning earlier, indirectly, we've hopefully had the chance also to have an impact on actually people that we haven't even met through the leaders and their civil society engagement. So those would, I guess, be the 3 pillars of the ICD, and also the 3 areas where we're trying to offer contributions to the field, but also to society.
Mark Dونفريد, Executive Director of the Institute for Culture Diplomacy in Berlin, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to meet you, and we look forward to collaborating in Morocco.
Thank you.